comic books, graphic novels, all things Marvel and DC are very much in the forefront and have been blockbusters for the last 11 years. And we've also seen more of a resurgence in things like fantasy films and fantasy stuff being taken more seriously. First you had Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, but now we're seeing like Game of Thrones. Now there's a prequel series. Now there's going to be a Lord of the Rings series, The Witcher, and various other things taking the forefront. So, starting off with one of our questions, why fantasy? Why do science fiction, horror, and fantasy films have such a following? In your own words.
You want to go?
I can. I think all those genres, which are really, I mean, they're like subgenres within, I don't know, like horror. It's weird because you mentioned like horror, sci-fi, fantasy. Those are all very unique, separately distinct things, but they all kind of, I think the fan bases cross over a lot. Horror maybe being the one exception, because some people are like, I just can't do horror, which I'm like, I love it, but that's fine. You know, if it freaks you out, it freaks you out. I think it kind of speaks to the, maybe not best, but like some of the most fantastical parts of childhood. Like, you know, like, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, the one movie, like, you know, when Lord of the Rings came out, I thought, oh, cool. I thought I was the only person that remembered Willow, which was like my favorite movie growing up. So, you know, and I'm like, hey, finally another one, because there was that long gap where it's like, oh yeah, we had Legend and, you know, everything else, but it's like there was not a lot between that, and you're right, now it is really popular. But like, this stuff all kind of takes me back to my childhood, and, you know, like sitting there with action figures and just playing make-believe, and, you know, before I even knew what a filmmaker was, just like telling little stories in my living room and cutting off the heads of my G.I. Joes and whatever. Just got me in trouble, but that's fine. I don't know, like, I think it's very, I don't know, wish fulfillment, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Because like my favorite thing about Game of Thrones is like, oh, it's like what I loved about that genre from my childhood, but as an adult, where it doesn't feel like, oh, you're watching a kid's show. It's like, you know, because I think Marvel movies are so popular right now, everybody's like, oh, they're kids' movies. I'm like, yeah, no, they're for me. You know, because it's like I waited my entire life growing up to see that on the big screen, and you can take your kids and they can enjoy it, and that's fine, but it's more for me than them, and then we get into an argument. But like, you know, because they're like, it's too violent. I'm like, no, it's not. It's fine. I'm an adult. And they're like, but I can't take my 5-year-old. I'm like, it's PG-13. You shouldn't take your 5-year-old anyway. But I think it's, I don't know. It's like the perfect, those genres specifically are like, I think, the best form of escapism. Because the world can be mundane, the world can be terrifying, it can be wonderful too, but it's like, you know, everybody wants to escape to something, and like, why do you want to escape to reality? Why would you not want to escape to a fantasy realm, or like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, or, you know, off to Middle Earth, or, you know, like Winterfell? I don't want to go there, everyone's going to die, but that's fine. I'm sorry, I'm nervous about the new season.
That's the key thing too. I mean, it's about escapism, and we all want that escapism.
Thank you, I was lost in the weeds, I wanted you to take
No,
it.
no, it's good. No, what you said about the extension of the childhood fantasy, that's great. But I think also the escapism part is very important, because if you look through cinema and just history, you tend to see that whenever there's like times of like economic distress, political strife, war, that's when fantasy films really do well. People really want to just get away from that reality, if even for a few hours, and they want to do something. So if you look at the 70s, when we were in like Vietnam, we had like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween. That's when those movies came out. Some of those really great movies. And now we've got all kinds of political and stuff going on right now. So yes, of course, people are going to go see. You know, you get to a point where you can't trust. You know, you not necessarily can't trust your president, you can't trust your congressman, you can't trust your minister. And now, so God, give me a superhero, give me someone I can go to.
You can trust Captain America.
You can trust Captain America. You can trust Superman, you know. You can trust Batman, just don't turn your back on him. And never. And then, you know, so it's always been that kind of thing. World War II, that's when the Universal monster movies were really popular. Frankenstein, the Wolfman, all that kind of stuff. So whenever it's something that just whenever you see that happening in the world, that's when people really flock to escapism, because they just need to get away from seeing what's from the newspapers, from the news, from the internet, all of it. need to get away. That's why it's so popular, I think.
Well, yeah, and if I can piggyback off that, I think it kind of, everybody loves an underdog story, and it's like, like when you say you don't know who to trust, you don't know who to root for, and you're just sort of like, that escapism of like seeing someone overcome obstacles, and the idea of like, yeah, it's embellished in fantasy, but it's like, like a real hero that's going to save the day, and you want to see them take down the bad guys. And even though we had like Infinity War, which had like a really, really dark ending, by the end of Endgame, it's like we're going to lose some of them, but they're going to win, and it's like, you kind of vicariously live through
that even though the villain won at the end of that, sorry, spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen it, but if the villain wins the end of it, you're kind of okay because that next movie's coming.
Yeah.
And that somehow they're going to turn it around.
Yeah, they announced the sequel, and they're going to come back and they're going to win the day, and that's sort of, I think, like inspiring and uplifting, and like even like going to like Lord of the Rings, it's like anybody could be a Frodo. Like the average everyman, every woman that just an ordinary person thrust into extraordinary circumstances that can be something greater than themselves or what they were yesterday, and that's sort of. I don't know, how can you not get moved by that?
Yeah.
Unless you're dead inside, which is fine.
Which is why you go see horror films.
Which is why we make them. So,
yes.
Those are some really great answers.
We ramble, sorry.
No, just to kind of piggyback off of that, it's like I know that one of the reasons that say Wizard of Oz was so popular when it came out, I believe it was around the Great Depression or maybe right after, and it became very popular because it was like an escapism. It was the first time there was ever colors, so it was giving people that kind of out in fantasy that they didn't have previously.
Yep.
So I know we kind of already answered like superheroes are popular now because the escapism. But what do you think about the new wave of fantasy movies and TV shows coming out? Do you think it's kind of like in response to the wave of superhero movies and shows? Because there's been so many, like all of the big things, like the Inhumans, that didn't do well. There was like the Arrow, there was the Flash, there was Legends of Tomorrow, there's Legion on FX.
The Netflix Marvel series.
Netflix Marvel.
Yeah.
So
R.I.P.
And the CW DC shows. Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, the thing about Hollywood and the film industry too is if something does well, everybody wants to copy it, because if something makes a lot of money, well, we want to make a lot of money too. So what's the best way to do that? Let's do what they did. So yes, I mean, superhero movies are making lots of cash. So they're going to do. They may take properties like maybe something like Marvel's Cloak and Dagger or DC Supergirl. And think, well, we don't want to take a risk on turning this into a big budget movie, throw millions of dollars at it and have it fail. So let's do it small scale for a television show, and do that. Now I've started, I've always been a DC fan because those are the characters I grew up reading, but it's interesting to see how they handle some of the shows. I started watching Arrow, but I quit that because he was killing people. I started watching Flash. I stopped that because they were locking up people in the cell with no due process, and I'm just like, okay.
You're not dead inside. Look at you.
See, there's hope. There's hope. But yeah, I think it's for that reason. Again, it's just more escapism. We need more heroes, and we can't find them in our everyday life, so we're going to go for the made-up ones.
Right.
Because at least them we can count on them. Unless, like I said, you're the Flash and you throw villains in cells with no due process.
But you do it really fast. So
you do it really fast. You got to think about it.
Yeah. No, I agree with everything you said. I think I guess you touched on this too, but from a business standpoint, it's like you're right. Whatever's popular, as long as it's making money, they're going to keep doing it. It's the same thing as like the Transformers movies. I'm sorry, that was like my childhood. You can hate on them all you want. I don't care. I will watch any Transformers movie. I don't care how shitty it is. Sorry, but it's just because that was like an important part of my childhood. But they were like just ripped apart by critics, but people kept going to see them. As long as they kept making money, they're going to go, okay, the last one, not Bumblebee, the one before it, tanked. And then they were like, okay, well, let's reboot and try something different. So it's like, it's really about what's making money and how it's going. And that you can do that with any genre. I'll spin back around to series in a minute because I know that was your actual question, but A Quiet Place, that did really, really well. Netflix is now on. I saw a poster for it. There's some movie coming out with Stanley Tucci in a couple weeks, and it has something to do with monsters that come in that and it's either by sight or sound, and it's like that's what Bird Box was, and they're like, okay, well, if we do monster thriller movies where it involves one of the senses, that did really well in the theater, let's make more like that. And now you kind of see it's like, oh, you're copying A Quiet Place, you're copying. Yeah, I know they were based on books, but it's like, those didn't get adapted until A Quiet Place did really well.
Did you see Pontypool?
Yeah.
The movie Pontypool?
God, I forgot about that movie, yes.
That's even earlier, but it's like you get infected.
Yeah.
You get infected by hearing a certain word or something.
Right. And that was like, so I mean, like, but okay, and you could even tie that into the argument that things are like cyclical. It's like, fantasy's hot and then it dies down, and you could do the other thing, like 3D, they've tried to bring that back how many times and it keeps dying. It's like on its way out now. But I think.
This is a shame.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it, but they, going back to ADD moment, going back to the series comment that you were asking, I think that series are particularly interesting because they're like long form storytelling. Like, I don't care how, you can only have so much character development and so much story happen in a 2 to even 3 hour movie. Like, Lord of the Rings work because it's like we got 3-hour movies. The Marvel stuff, I would argue, works because it's like really you kind of get a through line across 22 different movies, but each one is it's like its own little individual. And I would say any of those as a story can't really hold a candle to like a really great season of Daredevil or Punisher, which I was a fan of. I never tried any of the CW ones because it's a time management issue, and when I first was like, I think I want to try watching them, they had 4 seasons. I'm like, there's 24 episodes in each of those. I'm used to digesting 10-episode HBO seasons. I will never catch up, so just keep that on the back burner. It's like, it's almost like there's so many things that it's overwhelming, but I think people are just kind of hungry for content, and now that we're in this whole, which I'm trying to think of when it started. I think 24 actually is responsible for starting it, and then Breaking Bad kind of piggybacked. They did the binge mentality.
Yeah.
This is before Netflix was doing like original series, and like now everything is, oh well, rather than waiting a week in between episodes, like we grew up doing. It's like all episodes available on this day, and you're like, I don't want to get off the couch Saturday. I can watch the whole damn thing,
Exactly.
and then I do. Like I woke up Sunday a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna watch all 4 hours of this Ted Bundy documentary because why not? It's all available right now. Went down a weird rabbit hole. I just did true crime for a whole day. I had weird thoughts. Anyway, don't do that. Binge the superhero stuff because you kind of start to like get a little too. I don't know. I get a little into what I'm watching, and I'm just like, that's all that I want to watch. Like if I watch a superhero movie, I'm like, I want to watch another one. I don't want to change it up. I get very stuck in a rut. But yeah, I think. What intrigues me is when they reboot or double dip on things. Like when I heard about, you mentioned the Lord of the Rings series, the one that Prime's doing. I'm like, that could be cool, but also why? Because I'm like, it's fine the way it is. I can get that runtime just watching 3 movies. And it's like, yeah, you could do it better, but I'm going to be like, but that's not Elijah Wood. And it's like, and I even had an aversion to like the Joker trailer came out this week,
Yeah,
and I'm like, screw you, it's not Heath Ledger or Jack Nicholson. I'm like, no, I don't want to see that. But then I watched the trailer, I'm like, I totally want to give that money because it looked really good, I thought. But it's like they keep rebooting, and they're already doing like another Suicide Squad with Jared Leto still playing the Joker. They rebooted Spider-Man how many times? It's like you just keep getting like retelling the same stories, which brings me in a very ass backwards way to my point that I think, and this is kind of, I'm sure you can echo this frustration as a filmmaker, people don't want original content. They really want something that's familiar. And it's like, yeah, I'm happy. Like I grew up wanting to see these Marvel movies like with that budget, that scope, and this like time and care put into the craft on the big screen. It's like none of these could have been done in the 80s. So like it's kind of gratifying to see that now, but also they're digging so deep to adapt any however fringe property because it's into the Marvel or the DC brand because that's what people know. And okay, well, why don't we do a Lord of the Rings series? Because Lord of the Rings did really well. Okay, that's familiar, and there's always a new way to tell it. There's no new stories. Everything is like a template of one of the 5 basic story archetypes.
Well, it boils down to there's money to be made.
Thank you. Yeah.
And when you have money, when you have something that
He's more concise than me.
So if a studio's like, we can make, Lord of the Rings did really well. It's already got a built-in follower, a built-in fans base. let's go back and redo it,
Mhm.
and we'll bring all these people in, and if we do it well, we can keep it going, and we don't have to worry about like 3 movies. We can keep it going for 3 seasons and just.
Well, and Peter Jackson, he was a great filmmaker. He even got kind of caught in that because have you watched any like the behind-the-scenes stuff of him talking about making the Hobbit movies?
No, I haven't.
He didn't want to do it. Like Del Toro was a tested director and then walked away, and he's like, he was just going to produce it, and then he's like, I don't want to do it. New Line's like, we need this. Oh, and can you make a trilogy? He's like, it's one book. Like he hadn't planned on doing that. Then they're like, okay. I think I'm surprised they let it on the extended like behind the scenes stuff. But like I think on the 3rd one, he talked about he's like, I couldn't do this movie. I was literally just saying against the green screen, just fight. He was just making stuff up. He's like, we didn't have a scene written. I had no idea where I was going to go in the movie, and he finally eventually called the studio. He's like, you got to shut down for a few weeks because I don't know what movie I'm making. And they were like, but you have to have a trilogy because we want that Lord of the Rings money again. It's been however many years since that, and
Yeah.
you know, it's almost forcing like, please delve deeper into this property and give us more stuff that we can get returns on.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why, you know, with the Harry Potter series, the last movie was split into 2 movies, so they can keep getting that money, you know.
Well, that was the Matrix
It's
and
money.
Kill Bill's fault. They were like, it's a trend. But yeah.
What bothered me about it was that there's so much that they could have done in the Lord of the Rings series without having to split up the Hobbit. There are so many other Tolkien books.
Yeah.
Like, I've actually.
But they're
heard
probably
the
afraid that
series
no
is
one
gonna be
knows
based on
those
the
books.
Silmarillion.
Yes.
I'm calling it now. You're gonna get that now after that Tolkien movie's coming out. You seen that movie that's like based on like him kind of coming up with the ideas or whatever. After that, I think there's gonna that's gonna tie in with the Prime series, and then maybe they'll finally get to doing that. But
They'll say if there's an audience for it, they'll do it.
Yeah,
yeah, if it makes money, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
there's an audience for it.
If it doesn't, it won't. There is. We'll watch it.
Glad we started on that because the next question is going into creating art versus content and the surge of the film franchise, just kind of going back on that more.
Okay.
And just to answer, like, because you were talking about, like, when I say Lord of the Rings series, they're actually going to focus on, like, Numenor and, like, the pre-Lord of the Rings trilogy, so.
I hadn't read what it was. Okay, that's interesting.
I'm a big Tolkien nerd, so, like, I was like, I'm excited to see what they're going to do, and I'm excited that they're not redoing Lord of the Rings because I think it would be terrible to do. Because
That's
they've
what I
already
thought they
done
were
it.
doing. Okay.
But like the creating art versus content, as you're talking about, it's like the studios, which their business, I know they're first and foremost, they're there to make money
Mhm.
because that's how they pay for themselves and everyone else who works for them. But when you're creating art versus content and film franchise, it's like, where is the cutoff? And do you think that films themselves suffer when the bottom line is put forth before content and art and screenwriting and filmmaking?
Oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
I mean, I can tell you so many. You know, the bottom line is they'll keep making them as long as they keep making a profit, and when that stops, that's when the franchise stops for a while. Then someone fresh will come along and say, "Hey, remember Scream 1 had a really big audience and it made a lot of money. Let's reboot Scream. Let's reboot." I mean, you know, Blumhouse now is buying up all these properties. They bought up Halloween. They got Halloween. They got they're I don't know if they've got it yet. They're trying to get Scream. They're trying to get Chucky.
Did they do Pet Cemetery? Because that came out this weekend.
I don't know if they did Pet Cemetery or not.
Well, I did, but
It comes out tomorrow.
okay.
Okay, but
Some
they're
got Chucky because they've got a remake coming out.
Mark Hamill's voicing him. Take
yeah,
the
I
money.
saw that. And then Universal wants to reboot their Universal Monsters franchise again, and they're giving it to Blumhouse to do. The first one's going to be The Invisible Man with Johnny Depp. So
Dracula.
that's going to be. I mean, it's a good story. We've seen it a zillion times, but if they can do something fresh with it.
I'll watch it as
But
a kid.
it's the same. But it's the same thing. I mean, as long as there's money to be made, they're going to keep going. And that's what I love so much about the '70s. When Tobe Hooper made Texas Chainsaw Massacre, he was making a work of art. You know, he wasn't thinking about sequels. He wasn't thinking about prequels or spin-offs or toys or T-shirts or any of that stuff. He was trying to make the scariest movie he could make that reflected certain themes that he was interested in, and that's what he was trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was original, and terrifying, and it was a piece of art. Now today, look at what Disney's doing. This is off the subject of horror, but look at what Disney's doing. Disney's like, well, we've got these cartoons, we've got Dumbo, we've got Aladdin, we've got Beauty and the Beast. You know, what can we do with those? Let's do a live action version. We can keep the keep the money going and still keep it part of the franchise. So it's
A
just
live action Lion King.
yeah. So again, it's about money. It's about fans. You know, if a movie has fans, then that really helps. Saying we can reboot these movies, we can keep going with these movies because we have people who want to see them. And instead of dragging them in and trying to get them interested in a part 5 or a prequel, let's just reboot from the start. Because we own the property, and that's what it is now. It's content. It's not. They're not trying to make a piece of art. It's content to them. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
Let's bring in a director. Let's bring in a screenwriter. Someone who will do an okay job. They don't have to be great. You know, we don't have to bring in a William Goldman or anybody like that. We can. Is he dead now? By the way. Anyway,
Put me on the spot there, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's like we don't have to bring in good people. We can just bring in someone who can do a passable job because it's the property that's going to bring the fans in. We cast maybe some good names, that'll bring people in. But we don't have to worry about getting a good director, a good writer, because that's not what's going to do it. For the most part, There was something else I was going to talk about. I forgot what it was going to be about where I was going with that. But so if you got something, you can take it.
Oh, well, no. I totally agree with what you're saying. I think that it comes down to it's content over art. It's like what can we have? We want more. We want more. Like, you don't want to make something. Do studios even want anyone to make anything that they can't make a sequel to? Because you were talking about. Toby Hooper and Texas Chainsaw, same thing happened, I think, with Carpenter when he made the first Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, we're gonna do Halloween 2. He's like, why? No, the movie's done, it's finished. And they're like, I think his publicist or somebody said, you can take a minute and write the script and take a paycheck for the rest of your life, or you can walk away, but this movie is happening either way. Like, it's like they're going to make a sequel, this will be a franchise, and he's like, okay, so.
And Carpenter, who is a big money whore, said, I will take the money.
You say it like it's a dirty thing.
In the 70s,
Just saying, we're all
in
for
the
sale.
70s it was.
Yes, it's true. But no, I agree with you overall on the it doesn't matter. Let's just bring whoever in and get it done. But there's always that one exception. I actually. Oh, is it the guys that did Inside? I forget, but the directing team that's doing the Pet Sematary remake, when I read about, they're making it, okay, cool, I will watch this because, I've liked what they've done. Normally, they'll sit there and they'll just find somebody that can, studios, I think, anymore, really want an artist that's, malleable. They want a screenwriter that can be like, no, make sure you put this in there. They want a director that they can we're going to tell you what to do, but I want to do this. That scene's not going to make it into the movie. It's not your movie, it's our movie. I think that from what I read, not that I have a big bunch of studio experience or anything, but everything I'm reading, that sort of seems like the norm. But then you get a few exceptions every once in a while, like a James Gunn comes in and it's like, hey, yeah, I'm going to write and direct Guardians. Okay, well, nobody knows those characters. We'll see how it does. Did really well. Here, whatever you want, do too. And then there was he had the controversy and kind of got fired from Guardians of the Galaxy 3. That took a bit of a break. And they're like, well, we want you back. And now he's rebooting and writing and directing the sequel to Suicide Squad and doing Guardians of the Galaxy 3. And it's like, I think it worked out well, which I'm happy with. I like his work. I think that, I guess, I kind of always admired his career path, starting with Troma and working his way up till it's now you're being given a shit ton of money to do stuff that you probably dreamed about as a kid, and that's the dream as an artist. But he has a very unique voice, and you can see there was care put into the script, there was care put into the way he directed the stories. He's still making them the same way that he did Super or something. He's just doing it with more money, and I think that there are a few lone artists, but they have to really work against the grain and prove that I can do what I want, and this can be a unique voice or vision, and still make you money so that you will let me do what I want to do. But that's the minority.
Well, that's true, because when James Wan...
I phrased that weird, but I think you know what I'm saying.
When James Wan...
Yeah, he's another one.
When they came to him and said, Warner Brothers came to him and said, we want you to do a superhero movie for us, and you can do The Flash or you can do Aquaman. And James Wan said, well, I want to do Aquaman because he's more of an underdog character than The Flash is. He's like, but if I want the freedom to write it and direct it in my way, my style, or I don't want to do it. Because, even with these Marvel movies, if you're a Marvel fan or not, that's fine. But if you watch the Marvel movies, 75% of them all look the same. The production style's the same.
It's like a TV
They all have the
director.
same
You have to
tone.
kind of fall in line with this is
right,
how they
because
look.
they say this is the tone we want for the series, so you have to do it. And probably whoever ends up directing them is given a set of storyboards and say, this is what we want you to shoot. So,
Well, you can see that. Sorry to cut you off,
That's fine.
but like Thor Ragnarok, which I really, really, really love. But like Taiki Waititi, I always say his name wrong. He's great though, and he's brilliant, and I love him. But like he came in, What We Do in the Shadows. Did you see that one?
Yeah.
Like it's great. I love it, but it's like very little experience directing action. Which for a director, it's like if you've never directed a big budget action sequence, it's like I'm sure that'd be crazy intimidating.
Yeah.
Like, how do you go do that? But the thing is, you have the Disney Marvel machine of we have the best stunt coordinators, the best effects people, and everything. It's like you focus on the comedy, you focus on character. How does this fight break down? And then you have other people. You have the best possible team in place to set you up for success in that kind of world. Juan kind of had the same thing with Aquaman, but like he also had that experience of building franchises because he had the whole Conjuring universe and the Annabelle.
Insidious,
So like he
Conjuring.
understands of we have a branched out universe, and like he made Warner all that money with that franchise.
right. And going back to tone, you'll notice, again, with studio influence, you'll notice that Thor and Thor Dark World were very serious films.
They
And
thought
then
they were
all of a
making
sudden,
Shakespeare.
but then all of a sudden, we have Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which are very light and funny and made lots of money. So you can see that Marvel Disney said, we need Thor Ragnarok to be more like the Guardians of the Galaxy films because they make a lot of money, and we want to bring in more people than maybe who were just expecting Thor to be kind of a serious thing.
And it turned that little franchise around because like I thought that one was probably the best one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Did we answer the question?
Probably several times over.
Well, last question we have is filming in Indiana, pros and cons.
Do you want to start?
Okay. Well, when I grew up, I used to shoot little movies on Super 8 film, and I would bring in cousins, kids from the neighborhood, be in my movies. We'd always shoot these little things, and so when I started doing my film Bite Marks, which was in 2010, and we were going to shoot it. I knew I needed a junkyard junkyard location. I needed a semi truck. I needed a like a little roadside cafe, and I needed a series of loading docks.